So I will officially welcome everybody. My name's Elizabeth Klaczynski. I'm the Education and Program Specialist at the Library of Virginia, and we are so thrilled to be hosting this event tonight and so thankful that you all are attending. We will be having selected readings from the Southern Poetry Anthology reading, the Virginia edition or version. Joining us today as our hosts, we have Tara Bray and Linda Perry. We also have the editor of the volume with us, J. Bruce Fuller, this evening. So welcome to you and all of the wonderful poets we have assembled. Before I hand it off to Tara and Linda, just a few housekeeping things. Like I mentioned, you are more than welcome to post questions and comments in the chat. We will be having our poets do the readings and then afterwards responding to Q&A for about 15 minutes or so. So without further ado, please, Tara and Linda, take it away. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Linda and I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate poetry and poets. And of course, my screen, it won't show it because I put blurry on the background, but the Southern Poetry Anthology Volume 9 featuring poets with ties to Virginia. Also, thanks to Elizabeth and Catherine and the Library of Virginia for sponsoring this event and providing us with this virtual space. Thanks to the poets who have volunteered to come and generously read their poems with us this evening. And also thank you to family and friends and all lovers of poetry who have made time to be with us this evening. There's something magical, I think, that happens when we come together to celebrate this old art form and to celebrate those who keep it alive and going. So thank you. Also, we are lucky enough that we have one of the editors of the anthology here, J. Bruce Fuller, and I wanted to take a minute and introduce him. He is a poet with 3 chapbooks, The Dissenter's Ground, Lancelot, and Flood. His poetry has been published in a lot of journals, in particular, the Southern Review, the Birmingham Poetry Review. He teaches at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, where he is the director of the Texas Review Press. And he has been kind enough to offer up a short introduction about the anthology and the series that it is part of. So thank you, Jay. I'm going to hand it over to you, but thank you for being here.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I'm very happy to be here, and thanks so much to Linda Fleet Perry and Tara Bray for their hard work in organizing this event. Thanks to the Library of Virginia for hosting it. And to all of you for not only being here, but also being in the book. It's kind of cool to see a lot of names and faces that I've emailed with for years finally come to fruition. So I'm J. Bruce Fuller, and I'm the director of TRP, and I'm one of the volume editors on the Southern Poetry Anthology volumes. One of my main roles as both editor and director of the press is to kind of oversee the continuity of the Southern Poetry Anthology series, which has been going on for many, many years now and will continue for many more. When completed, it'll total 16 volumes of contemporary Southern poetry. So it's an honor to work on the series because I was a fan of it long before I came to work at TRP, and the opportunity to be able to shepherd these books and complete the series has been very fulfilling for me. And in talking with Will Wright, the founding series editor, about the future of the series and reinvigorating the series, we felt that Virginia was the absolute best state to start with. You guys are very blessed with many, 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 many great poets. Not all of our southern states have as many great poets as Virginia. And we feel that now that volume 9 is done, it's the finest volume of poetry in the series thus far. And it's really for us, the editors, becoming the kind of basis for all future books in the series. So thank you for your work. as I said, it's great to meet all of you virtually finally, and I'm really looking forward to hearing you all read your poems. And just thanks again for being here and for having me.
Thank you so much, Jay, for those words and for being with us tonight, for this beautiful anthology of poems, and for everything you've done to support this reading. I'm Linda Perry, Tara's co-conspirator in this venture. Thank you, Tara, for letting me know about the opportunity to submit poems into the Southern Poetry Anthology in the first place, and then for having the phenomenal idea that we organize a reading to celebrate its publication. Thanks also very much to Elizabeth and everyone at the library for so graciously sponsoring this reading and for helping us to navigate all the logistics. It is an honor to be here with all of you tonight, especially with these fine poets from around the state. Thank you for joining us. We have 19 people reading 20 poems from the book tonight. We wish we could have invited every poet in the anthology to read, but that would make a marathon because there are 106 poets featured in the collection. Tara and I tried to represent all parts of Virginia, and tonight you'll hear from poets from the westernmost tip of the state, Scott County and Saltville, Virginia, to Northern Virginia, Tidewater, and all points in between. 4 of the poets represented tonight are poet laureates of Virginia, the late, great Claudia Emerson, Sophia Starnes, Ron Smith, and our current laureate, Louisa Igloria. Many of the poets reading tonight are esteemed, beloved, longtime teachers. Thank you all for your service in the name of poetry. Our poets will read in alphabetical order and introduce themselves. We have invited poets to create a bit of spaciousness between the readings, to wait a few beats before introducing themselves after the person before them is read. Despite the randomness of this ordering, you may find it serendipitous the way these poems speak to one another. And now we're all in for a treat. Let us begin.
Hello, I'll go ahead and kick it off as the first poet tonight. Thank you so much to everyone for being here. And I'm Christina Beasley. I'm a poet in Washington, D.C. who grew up in Virginia and lived there for many, many, many years. And the poetry editor of a literary magazine, Barrel House. So please check us out. We're regional. And with that, I'll go ahead and kick it off. Meditation on hunting season. The deer infiltrate our suburbs, invade soft and wide-eyed. The rifle's muzzle slight in my palms and cold in autumn. The nearby beast body creaks, shifts, and rustles the leaves, destroys flower beds with its hunger, snout deep in the daffodils. This moment, overwhelmed with the possible, bolt action of a gun, bolt action of a stag. If I give too much headspace, the gun misfires. The nipple of a firearm is near its percussion cap, its explosions the beating of a heart. A weapon lives like an animal and corrodes like an animal. Rate of fire is prized over accuracy, and nature requires a blaze. The energy of a cosmos can be condensed into a metal pin the size of an eyelash. I've learned to cradle it in my hands, to hold death in my hands, and I muzzle it, unmuzzle it. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I'm John Castine, and I'll read my poem, Incomplete Stranger, And as I read it, as I read it again this afternoon, I realized I was in the wrong season, but the right place. I actually spent the afternoon on the Rockfish River today, so feels like coming home, I suppose. Incomplete Stranger. October evening in pasture at Appalachia's slender feet. The tufted sprays of little blue stem that flicker like votives on a hill full of early fall snow. Skaty night sounds of raccoon leaf litter. To the east, a floodplain, reeds. To the west, starlit beneath the new moon, old dog's teeth of the Blue Ridge. Before me, bathed in starlight, the Rockfish River courses from nowhere to nowhere else, like a vein of the landscape's earthly body, marl encumbered, leaf mottled, sinuous, and by favorite fine distinctions, hunger and appetite, delicate and fragile, secret and private. The clouds and hills are speaking in their own tongues again, opaque blue-black veil of evening, opaque lacunae of the past. One durable memory, the crisp, sharp, nothing scent of cold she finds in my hair with her face and slim fingers. Big medicine. The needle ice that springs up from the loam and shale. The hem of the ginkgo's saffron dress of dropped, fanned leaves draped luminous over green swards of lawn. A happiness like children's. Sometimes it's best to take a thing too far. Sometimes it's not an ending, just an end. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Latorial Faison, and I'm on the faculty at Virginia State University. This evening, I am going to be reading my poem, Mama Was a Negro Spiritual. I hail from the southeastern part of the state down in Southampton County. This poem is a tribute to my late grandmother, who was born in 1932, Shirley Lee Turner Williams. She was a goodnight prayer, a moon that shined down through my bedroom window. She was the alphabet, a Sunday school verse, a third Sunday gospel song to rehearse, a mostly misunderstood exchange of power, responsibility, and command. She was a Black 73 Ford LTD, a Nottoway River crossing, a house filled with too many other folks' children, an orphan that life and death left behind to find, to give some joy. She was a funeral going, everybody in Southampton County knowing, bad men are destroying pillar of strength. She was a Friday evening ride to town, a Saturday morning cleaning, a Sunday go to meeting kind of human being. She laughed louder than Jim Crow's law and cried softer than God's peace. She was a secret I never told, the carrying of some other man's burden. She was true, rare, uncut, Black and picked up, ripped from some earthen mine, placed beneath a sharecropper's kind to bear witness, to bear this all deep down inside. She was a Black hearse, a deaf man walking, a raising and waving of tired hands. She was thunder, she was lightning, a heavy rain that fell in spring. She was a third grade education, small town syndication. Her house, a good book, and she the words penned fervently, permanently on all its pages. She was a Ridley Road scholar, a kitchen where cooking got done and well. She was Miss Shirley, the lunch lady, bus driver, Sammy's wife, giver of too much Black self. Mama was a Negro spiritual, a hymn hum from the inside of a Baptist hymnal in an old rocking chair from a corner of our living room. She was a wisdom no man could whistle, a fancy no woman could fake, a journey none living in the now could fake. She was an old-fashioned lyric everybody could lift their voice and sing. Thank you.
That was so beautiful. Thank you. I am Leah Naomi Green, and I am in Rockbridge County, Virginia, outside of Lexington, which is where I am now. I'm going to read from the book, so you can see the pretty book while I read it. It is a very pretty book. Thank you, everyone who's worked so hard. My poem is called Jacob Have I Loved. 1. I think I lost the genetic lottery, my cousin told me in one of the last conversations we had. He was 33, our parents twins. We were living again the few good stories. Tell me the one about Esau. 2. Tell me about God hating him. I want it to be a problem of translation, language, or time. I have never met an Esau. And what chance does a born person have, though we name them all Jacob? Tell me my own daughter doesn't wonder if she's naked. She is running through the yard, explaining something to her sister. I want to keep her from hiding in the understory as Eve did with Adam, children believing they could disappear from God. 3. The absurdity of hiding anywhere. I want to show her how to hold her fear like a child of her own, how to ask it between sobs where it hurts. 4. Can I hold you when you're born? My daughter asks. She is sitting on my lap. We're sorting photos of my cousin, every one in time, collapsed. Not a good shot at any age. I hold up the best, a young man, to take a picture of the picture for the obituary. I orbit it for some time, trying to remove my body from the light, believing the shadow on his face is from me. 5. I've tried to remove my body. How afraid have I been of being found in it unblessed? There is no reason for beauty, no metric that holds a blessing in itself. How we look to one another. Don't you have even one blessing left for me? 6. The shadow is in the photo, on him, in the room where he stood without me before I was born. 7. In our yard, it's getting dark. Shadows are blessings that diffuse all the glare from the heavens. In the cool of the evening, they heard God walking around in the garden. Where are you? My daughter's face is a clean window, no glare to mirror or ask if I am naked, if she is Jacob, only this reflection in one another's eyes.
That was beautiful, Leah. So nice to see you and everyone tonight. And thanks for all the good vibes so far. I'm Catherine Hankla. I'm the author of 11 books of poems, and I just want to plug my newest book here, Immortal Stuff, that came out last month. And I spent most of my teaching career at Hollins. I'm going to read from the book as well. This poem is from an earlier book. The title is In the Belly. Earrings like a pair of wedding gloves. A young clerk in the old world sells me white stones from the window display. Amber, she intones and repeats, amber. Neither luminescent, fault-spiked caramel nor silent, opaque coffee grounds. These crisp stars in night sky draw my eye, my sight slightly marbled by desire. I'm pondering another. I thought I'd lost, like an old skin, a lover set beside me in silver, to whom I was bound and released as from watery deep brown. I've climbed to air on autumn earth upon a crust of papery leaves and spoken what I must, yet conversations never end when words wound inside begin to surface through agents like developing prints, the way history seeps into the present hour with purposes and meanings long turned sour. A photograph appears darkest, tree limbs serrating sky, where the negative is nearly transparent. Chaos moves into form while rigid design breaks like a maelstrom. Beneath cathedrals, bridges, each grand structure lies the grave of a worker, a reversal, where the world is torn like a ticket in the garden of betrayal, worn raw. I find the oldest amber grown white and remember the scars in the belly of love. I was asked to read a poem by my long friend and longtime colleague, R.H.W. Dillard, Richard Dillard, who passed away earlier this month. This poem is Walking Home from the Raleigh Court Branch Library. I reached the first real page of John H. Watson's Reminiscences, who took his degree in 1878. The year is 1949, and I have only a mile to go. I am walking home. Sometimes today, I want to loosen out like a large flag, possibly orange, in an early April wind and dew. But more often, I remember walking home where I can really settle in. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Those are beautiful readings. Thank you, friends, and thank you to the Library of Virginia for hosting us. Thank you to Tara and Linda also, and to the volume editors, J. Bruce Fuller, Amy Wright, Jesse Graves. It's just lovely to be together with so many wonderful poets in this beautiful volume. I decided to read the poem on page 116 because Amy Wright kindly mentioned it in her introduction. It originally was published in my most recent book, Maps for Migrants and Ghosts. The heart's every heave, say cotton, say the crease in the sleeve of a shirt, the plainness in a collar, the brim of a hat. If the future is here, whose face greets you in the mirror as you collect water in your hands, as you hand your money over the counter to pay for bread, a cup of coffee, a ticket. A man on the train steps in the path of someone he doesn't even know, or trails another man home in his truck for 2 whole miles to spew insults in his foreign-looking face. How is this the future, too? Your heart holds its breath, lurches from platform to crowded lobby. Say, elegy, insistence, not blank stare. Say, danger and defiance, not shoulder shrug, not fold over. And I realized I think I didn't introduce myself. I am Luisa A. Gloria, and I am reading from Norfolk, Virginia. And I just want to drop into the chat a link to one of the projects that I began at the beginning of my term as 20th Poet Laureate of the Commonwealth. It's the Virginia Poets Database, and I do encourage everyone, if they haven't done so already, to please check it out and include your information. I would love it to be a resource for so many of us who are teaching, who are sharing poetry all over. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jeffrey Johnson. I'm from Alexandria, and with relatives down in Richmond and misspent college years in Blacksburg, you could say that I hail from all over the Commonwealth. This evening, I'll be reading a little angst-filled poem called Particle Search in D minor. We've reached the day when Mozart is average and Einstein a mere arranger of mathematical symbols. Relativity has made us music. The requiem is woefully hummed by famished schoolchildren in search of genius in their own time. Perfection now lies in the splendid grafting of ones and zeros in a prairie warehouse, proof positive of our holy homogenization, making us safe only to spend lest we be sequestered from the masses. Hedge fund formulas frame the universe, and derivative spreadsheets provide the soundtrack. While in a basement in Cambridge, a man wearing designer glasses will knife open the half shells of a cork, offering yet another extraordinary redundancy. The plates keep grinding by, occasionally toppling a city or two, as we suck on tasteless strawberries from halfway around the world, wondering if it will all end on a complex chord surrounded by simples or on a single doleful note.
Hello, I'm M.A. Keller. A handful of you here know me as Michael. I am reading from Richmond, Virginia. I'm originally from Radford, Virginia, and went to school afterwards in Harrisonburg, went up to teach high school in Front Royal, and then finally settled back here in Richmond. I want to thank everybody who made the event and the volume possible. Thank you so much. I'm going to read Rope. I want to dedicate the reading to Graham Zimmerman, who was a wonderful mentor and teacher in my youth, and I wouldn't know anything about the materiality of Rope or what I write about here if it weren't for him. Rope. I can think of few things more inexplicably pleasing than rope. A new coil of it, the heft, the smell of a wood porch trackside hardware store, the barn loft scratch of it, and for me, its uselessness, who has no boat, no load to haul, no iron stake begging a barking dog and the ensuing muddy circle, no need to tie anything down. Have you ever unraveled the ends just so and woven them back to finish off a fray to a perfect nub? Or cut a rope in summer just to splice it together, amazed at how this thickened sisal weave can hold? Have you singed stray fibers with a careful match for hours? I'll teach you how to do it perfectly, to put two pieces together, to make a good end, to tie a square, a timber line, a half hitch, a monkey's fist, and the one-handed wonder that will save your life.
Thank you, Michael. That was lovely. Thanks everyone who's helped to organize this and come together to listen to us tonight. I'm on day 6 of a COVID infection, so forgive my rough voice. I hope you can hear me. I'll try not to clear my voice too often. I've chosen to read a poem by Claudia Emerson, a friend and colleague to many of us here tonight and around the state. It is from her final posthumous volume, Claude, Before Time and Space. B. When Claude says blessed is who he has seen and believes, you know he is about to tell the one about bees. His father told him which kind of sting was worse, but you have to see some things for yourself. And when you ask how on earth do you catch a bee to see anything, he tells you how. You hunker down next to a sweet potato blossom and watch until one lands on the ruffled cuff and then ambles down into the sweeter sleeve. You lean over and pinch the blossom shut. And there you have it, ready to sting yourself so you can decide on your own. And he wants for you not to doubt this. Even more blessed you will be, you have heard and not seen. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Felicia Mitchell, and I live in Meadowview in southwestern Virginia. I've been here since 1987 and have made this place home. Everybody who knows me knows I'm happiest out in the woods, and many people know I'm also happiest when I'm wandering also in a museum. Spend some time up in the Tobman in Roanoke, and so this poem I'm thankful to see in print in this book, and I'm thankful to the James Dickey Review for its first publication. Was inspired by a visit to the Tobman, seeing some art I had first learned about when I lived in Athens, Georgia, long ago. With Howard Finster at the Tobman Museum. It feels holy here, the insane sane. I could be standing in paradise instead of Roanoke, my dress painted on with angel wings, dozens of them fluttering over my shoulder and under my arm and next to my big toe. My smile is always red here, red and bright and big-lipped like cheer wine. Everybody drinks it, or Coca-Cola with peanuts, as all the cats I ever knew yell across a bottle-covered fence, mating for eternity, so paradise will be mine. Always as full of kittens as of hearts broken and healed now in paradise, the biggest backyard I will ever visit, where on every tree hangs a tire by a rope. Hope swings soft and sultry in the celestial breeze, like a summer in Georgia that will never, ever, never, ever, never, ever end. Amen. Thank you so much.
I'm Elizabeth Morosky. I'm a transplanted Midwesterner born in Chicago, but I've been in Virginia since 1986. The poem I'm going to read is from the chapbook Still Life with Timex, which is a memorial to my son, Alexander Evans, who died 10 years ago. And there's a lot of pain still here, but this is the first time I've been able to read it. And I hope that it touches you. And before I read it, I would like to say how wonderful it is to be with you all today. It just makes you want to say, thank God for poetry. The poem is called No Heart. The head knows the child who grew inside her is no more. Between head and heart, a tundra lies, windswept and cold, to be crossed on foot, without boots or overcoat. The heart winds itself round and round with silk thread, tight enough to hold everything breaking. The head consoles. In time, the miles to go will grow shorter. Muffled in silk, cocooned, the heart cannot see the houses have lights on, can only reach back like a blind person to the way things were.
I'm Bill Nodder, reading from the Richmond area. I have to admit to being a transplant, but been here for what seems like quite a while now. I have to give a nod to Elizabeth Bishop for the title of this poem, and I don't know if this really is necessary, but the Alice Chalmers mentioned at the end is a brand of extinct tractor. So the Holstein struck by lightning doesn't count. Long dry, she roamed the farm like a pet, a cow too dumb to come down off the hill. The other was just before supper at my friend's house, whose mother served bread and butter every meal and made sure we said please and thank you. His great-grandfather sat on a milk can against the kitchen wall, retired farmer in overalls and a feed store checkerboard hat. One moment he's talking Timothy Hay with the young fathers while their wives arrange the children and the silverware. Then he's pitching sideways to the floor. They shuffled us kids to the paneled living room, and I forget whatever happened next. There was no casket, no absence in my life. Now I know his son sped over from the farm before the ambulance and medics who would wheel him through that narrow door. It took years to connect that sudden fall with words like heart attack or stroke, things that strike the body from inside. My uncle chained the Holstein to the Alice Chalmers, pulled her through the pasture, left her behind the barn to wait for the rendering truck in a cloud of flies.
I'm Kiki Petrosino, joining you from Orange, the town of Orange, Virginia. But I work at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville as a professor of poetry, where I also direct the creative writing program. The poem I'll read for you is called Farm Book. Whenever I write about Mr. Jefferson, he gallops over. Knock, knock, he begins in quadruplicate. It's pretty wild, like when my student writes a poem about a house of skin and hair, a house that bleeds. Mr. Jefferson's place is so dear to me, white husk my heart beats through until I can't write more. In my student's poem, the house stands for womanhood, pain coiled in the drywall. Sorrow warps the planks, pulling nails from ribs. In Kentucky, I'm the only Black teacher some of my students have ever met, and that pulls me somewhere. I think of Mr. Jefferson sending his field slaves to the ground, a phrase for how he made them pull tobacco and hominy from the earth, but also for how he made of the earth an oubliette. At 16, they went to the ground if Mr. Jefferson thought they couldn't learn to make nails or spin. He forgot about them until they grew into cash or more land. For him, it must have seemed like spinning. Sorrow of souls forced to the ground as a way of marking off a plot. At 16, I couldn't describe the route to my own home, couldn't pilot a vehicle, could hardly tell the hour on an analog clock. I had to wear my house key on a red loop around my neck. Now I rush to class beneath a bronze Confederate, his dark obelisk, his silent mustache. My books tumble past the lectern as I recite Mr. Jefferson's litany, swan, loon, nuthatch, kingfisher, electric web of names, yet in the ground I know a deeper weave of gone away ones who should mean more to me than any book. I live in language on land they left. I have no language to describe this.
My name is Matt Prater. I am from Saltville, Virginia. This poem is for Voyager, leaving the solar system. Subtitle, Ode to Nikki Giovanni, from notes from coursework with her and her advocacy for space exploration. One needs the urge to go and the urge to stay. A perfect balance of those two, and a taste for silence. One needs a stoic intimacy with a long success that seems like failure for a lifetime. Then marks that life in the memory of all its scoffers' children. One needs to know about finding and being found. One needs to know about being mistaken, and all the dangers on each side of that wobbling coin. One needs to know what not to touch and how to step in a river where they haven't stepped before. A genius for numbers and plasmas would be nice, of course, but far better to know how to die before we die, and the difference between that death and the death of the body or soul. One needs what can't be taught by Caltech or the branch academies, that being this: we will find what we bring with us. We always have. Every monster we've ever imagined was our projection. What the conquistadors imagined they saw, they did. Thank you.
I'm Rita Sibbs Quillen. I live on a farm in very far Southwest Virginia, down in Scott County. I'm very happy to be in, for the second time, in one of the poetry anthologies. I was in the Appalachian edition that came out many years ago. So I'm happy to be a part of this Virginia one too. I'm very grateful for the Texas A&M Press for taking on this yeoman's task of creating these volumes. Thank you to the Library of Virginia and to all of you for being here. Poetry Month is a wonderful time for sure. I'm going to read a poem about my late father's love of gardening called Garden Right. Each spring on his postage stamp of earth, the same rituals. At the first warm breeze, out came the two-by-fours, nailed together into a rectangle where he tenderly pushed lettuce seeds into soft mud, draped the airy muslin covering over it all like a communion table waiting for the church bell, stepped back and smiled. Consecrate this crop. The days had to lengthen before the rest could join in. The old rusty push plow of his ancestors, a hoe he had kept from the barn of his boyhood, lifelong tie to the gardens of the dead. It is right to give thanks and praise. He used the creek and tree line in April to cite the straight line that would become, by the hot buzz of August, a choir of corn releasing soft hallelujahs. Beans would be the kneeling women at the altar. Onions, the sour deacons of the doxology. Squash women in yellow bonnets and calico of his youth. Sweet, fat cabbage babies wafting and waving in the blinding sun's light. We are what feeds us. He plunged little crosses in the ground where tomatoes smeared with the stigmata of juicy joy would shine over the garden. Not a thing wrong with the bread and wine, but a country boy had to have beans. No communion wafer unless it's made with ground corn. Let us keep the feast, lift up our hearts. And my father, the high priest of the scriptural lines of this bright, dusty kingdom, giving absolution with green garden hose in days of drought, would know precisely when to slowly lift the cloth from that communion table, pinch tender shoots to lay on his tongue, just the tiniest bite. Take and eat. This refuge, this is all our salad days. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, and to everybody who is here, and all of these wonderful poems, and Tara and Linda and Jay Bruce, just everybody who made this possible. I'll say three things about my poem before I read it. One, thank God the Lee statue has been taken down since this poem has been written. Two, when I was 41, I had my child and I was already ensconced in a full teaching life. And so the question was how to create some time for writing and to keep going, which I guess is the question for everybody. And so two things help make that possible: a Starbucks that opened at 5:30 in the morning, and also that VCU, one of the places that I teach, requires us to have a scheduled office hour. We'll meet with students other times as well, but there has to be a time that we are in our office. And so I scheduled it at 8 a.m., knowing that students wouldn't come and that I would meet with them later. But that gave me a solid time to both write and to finish grading papers. And finally, I'm also thankful to all of the poets who are no longer alive, who form our community of saints and books. And there are several of those poets mentioned in this poem: the poet Neruda, Donald Hall, Jared Manley Hopkins, the writer Guy Davenport, and the visual artist Betty LeDuc, who is still alive. Okay, so here's to all of us in our office hours, no matter how they look. Office hours, 8 a.m. Here in my office, I read Neruda on sweetness, Hall on death, the bold humility of Hopkins writing a poem to Christ our Lord. I put down the books and drink coffee, glad it's too early for students. I am ordained to love you, a friend wrote. Time to get to the paper about a mother, 39 with 6 kids. I straightened in my chair, then put it off. Yesterday, my daughter slept in the car seat when she and my husband picked me up at the medical building. Under the awning, crackling with rain, I looked across Monument at the statue of Lee on his horse, wanting lush grasses to grow up around him, swallowing that history whole. In my counselor's office, on our knees, we searched under the black chair for a red ball tattooed with angels, fallen off the top shelf. When my daughter woke, my husband tried to get her to say sycamore. Remember, we practiced. What kind of tree did you see? At home, she shook her head. No sycamore, then went back to the breast, laughing, combining nipple and apple. Napple, napple. Bottle of water and journals, no phone messages. I tape Hopkins' poem to my daughter's photo next to LeDuc's Africa bird women. It's all that I see, these keepers of the peace. Davenport wrote, Christ had a genius for compassion. I want it now, before the first knock. Thank you.
I'm Ron Smith. I am honored to be a member of this group and to be in this anthology. Everybody knows Virginia is the mother of presidents, but they don't know it's the mother of poets. It is a deep pleasure also to hear those accents. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and I heard that Athens, Georgia accent. But I've lived in Virginia most of my life now and happy to do so. I have 3 poems in the anthology, and 2 of them are in my new book. They're the first and second in this book that appeared 8 days ago, by the way. Beautiful cover by a local artist, Emma Knight. And I'm so glad that her strange and beautiful art has appeared on that book. But I'm going to read a poem from my first book, which is also in some ways my fifth book. His second edition came out not too long ago from Madhap Press. It's my most anthologized poem, and it's dedicated to Dave Smith, Terry Hummer, and Carolyn Kaiser, three poets who helped me with this poem. I hope I have all my drafts so that I can find exactly what ideas they gave me. Some of them, they suggested things and I rejected it, of course, right away. And then later realized they were right. But anyway, it's called Photograph of Jesse Owens at the Gun. Beneath a puff of white gun smoke, a man the shade of cinders has risen from between white lines at an angle sharp with speed. He is himself a thrust of angles, 1 foot down, one hand reaching, elbow, knee, the single bend at the waist, all his flesh strung tight. In the background row of pale, blurred faces, these who appear to wear his colors must be his teammates. We can tell only that they do not seem to cheer. Behind them, the tears of Berlin mass into gray clouds. All the races of 1936 are stopped inside this black frame. The man whose captured body pulls us to the wall cannot reach the tape, his form caught here in the rough shape of the swastikas that fly in the corner. Nothing moves, nothing changes. We stare and stare. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's really good to be here. My name is Sofia Starnes, and I was born in the Philippines of a Filipino-Spanish family, but I've been a Virginian now by marriage, by gift, and by choice for almost 40 years. So this is home is Williamsburg, Virginia. The poem I will read is called Butterfly Effect. I think everybody's familiar with the term of how butterfly effect, one thing affects, everything is connected no matter how far. But sometimes you don't think of it as part of the connectedness inside, as a story that unfolds. And the poem is a design. It's a very short form, which has 10 lines, 10 beats per line. So it has to be very concise, not a lot of space for exploration. I think of it as the words being darts in a concentric circle, and then the reader has to pick up the rest and hopefully will do so. So here is Butterfly Effect. It sprinkles dusk and dragonflies disperse. A bone pulls gently home under the skin. A lamb sleeps in her pen while mothers nurse their babies at their breasts. Above, a crimson cloud brings all things close under a risen star. For every bleat a ewe, hosannas, voice on voice in daily briefs, the daily choice of words. They nudge a needle and outlast a wrong. And though the day withholds its noise, our silence too is offering of this past. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. My name is Michael Trocchia. I think I'm the last reader, and it's really wonderful to be here, and it really is an honor to be reading with all of you and to be part of this anthology and this reading. So I thank everyone who's made both of those things possible. I'm in Harrisonburg, Virginia, Rockingham County. I teach at James Madison University. I teach philosophy, and I work in the library there as well. I'm a transplant, and part of the poems that are in this anthology, there are 3, but 2 of them in particular, I think, are working through the sense of having lived half your life somewhere and then living in Virginia. I'm from New York, West Hempstead, New York, just outside of Queens, and kind of grew up around concrete and glass, and now I live here. And so I will read a poem called Verum and Factum, and there's mention of Giambattista Vico, who was a 17th century philosopher from Naples, born in Naples, died in Naples. And I have Neapolitan roots. My grandparents came to New York in the 50s and settled there from Naples. And the title Verum and Factum for him meant something to the effect of like, what is intelligible to us or what is true to us is what is made or what we make. And I think for me, part of restarting in a different place is how you make that place your own and how you make that place intelligible to yourself. So, you know, I remember just driving out in the mornings. I lived in Stanton for a while, up to Harrisonburg, and just taking in the landscapes and kind of creating this sense of what to make of all this is where this poem comes from. Verum and Factum, after Giambattista Vico. What to be made of sparrows stuck in the throat? What to be made of the girl gasping in the shed, of dead trees holding up sheaves of white sky, of the hillside green, clean of human breath? Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody here for their beautiful work and quite moving words. That was just incredible. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you again to all of our audience members as well. We have just a little while for some questions. And I think the last poem, Michael, segues really beautifully into a first question, which is, let's see, how does Virginia influence your work? And please feel free, readers, to just respond. There's no order here. So again, the question is, how does Virginia influence your work? What is its effect? Please feel free to address that question. Thank you.
I'd like to go ahead and jump in.
Perfect, great.
I forgot to say this in my bio, but I was just thinking, I've been pretty much a lifelong resident, and I was listening to everybody talk about being a transplant. I'm a military spouse. My husband just retired from 28 years, so we've moved all over, but we keep coming back to Virginia. We were both born here. So I was born and raised in Southampton County, very rural, very southern, very not diverse. I went on to attend the University of Virginia, which also shaped me. So that poem I read about my grandmother being typical, Black woman born in the 30s with all that came with that. Studied at UVA. I also got my graduate degree at Virginia Tech. So I feel like I've kind of lived all over. And then finally didn't have my HBCU experience, and I completed my doctoral studies at an HBCU, which I just think brings me full circle as a Virginian, but also as a military spouse. I've had the opportunity to live in some of our very, urban areas. I lived in Northern Virginia for 3 years. So I think I really have kind of had it. The only place I have not lived is Appalachia, and I don't know if that's gonna happen. But the poetry, it's just who I am. Virginia is in every line that I write. I don't know how it could not be. Every poem, I remember going to college and people saying you're definitely from the South because of my accent. But I think people get that when they read my poetry as well. So Mama was a Negro spiritual. I hope that my Black Southern self comes out in everything that I write. It's not intentional. It's just that's what it is. So thank you, everyone. I have enjoyed hearing all the poems tonight, seeing them in the book, but hearing you read them was just amazing. Best wishes to all of you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any thoughts about the influence of Virginia on your work? Please feel free, Louisa.
Yeah, hi. I know that Virginia has this wonderful trove of rich history, histories of and narratives of nation formation and nation building. But part of my history of arrival here in Virginia 25, 26 years ago is also related to another community which has made Virginia their home. So I'm referring to Filipino Americans, and the Navy is just up the road. So I want to say that a lot of my work also looks at what we can do to complete all of these narratives and show the pictures of other people who have made this place their home.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts before we move on to the next question?
Plenty, but we should move on.
We should move on. Okay. So there's two questions that are kind of related. The first one is, how do we get more young people engaged in poetry?
Could I jump in here?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
This is a question I get a lot, and I think I am going to have a very weird response for a poet. I don't think it matters if we get young people involved in poetry. I think what it matters is that we get people involved in what poetry does, which is an active engagement in the story of their own lives and the connection of the story of their own lives to their neighbors. It doesn't matter what form that takes. Poetry is one road in, but I think sometimes that word gets kind of it has connotations around it, and it has weight around it, which is often wonderful, but can often be a block and a door out. I don't know what to do about that, but I just wanted to make sure I said that, because that's like I always wanted to say to that question. So I'm taking too much time, but I just wanted to say that.
I think it goes back to having events like National Poetry Month and having poets in the schools, though, too. I don't think there's anything students are more responsive to than an actual person reading their poems to them or talking about poetry. I always hear people talk about how students don't respond to poetry, but when I've been in the schools, that's not been my experience necessarily, that they will respond and you have some really lively discussions and they'll write for you. I've had teachers say, I can't believe these students wrote these things for you because I am astonished by what, and they want to give you credit, like, oh, you got this out of them. This was amazing. But I think any poet could have done it. They've never met a poet. They've never had a real person come to them and talk about it from the heart and read their work. And they're very moved by the fact that you're so open, and come and share what you do with them. So I think personal contact is key.
I just wanted to add that I think if you encourage readers of poetry, then you will have poets. Otherwise, a poem is never complete until it's read. So we're nothing without readers. And so I think if we share a poem that we love because we just love that poem, and we share it with a young person and we tell them why we love that poem so much, then love the action of reading a poem and wanting to read another poem will make them love and then one day, if they're poets, they will write. If they are poets, they will write. Nothing will stop them. But we need to. I became a poet because I love to read the poems, and then and so I think encouraging the reading of poetry is the first step. So it's at least an important step in the way I see it.
I might add to just the permission to just take joy in forming images and word combinations that you don't understand or even know what they might mean, and just to open up the imagination. And I think sometimes that can light, a mind in some ways where there's something there and they're not quite sure, but they've made it. And there's things that words are doing and teaching us that maybe we're not so sure of when we go in. So I think getting away from maybe the idea of like having to know what you're writing about, at least at the start, maybe might help make it more accessible and more adventurous for children.
I'd like to add that there's so many different ways to come to poetry. I know there's a lot of educators here. We all spend a lot of our time in schools and teaching. But, I was introduced through poetry from a diary at a book fair, just that love of writing. And for many of our children, for many kids, it won't be a poem that brings them to poetry. It'll be some life experience, some connection. It could be a song. Most students don't think about song lyrics as poetry. They don't think about rap music as lyrics. So it could literally be anything. I remember going to a school in Richmond recently in Black History Month. And because I read this poem, because I wrote about where I was from and talked about, identity as a Black woman. I had several young kids in the room, who had roots in other countries, one from the Ukraine, and they wanted to write about their experience, so I think it's just kind of finding a way for poetry to be an outlet, whether it's reading or writing. But I think so many of the kids will come to it in so many different ways. It won't always be academic for the kids. It won't always be because it happened at school. It could be because of something that they saw, if they paint or they draw and can make a connection. So, whatever the kid is open to, I think that's a way to lead them into it.
Yeah, I like the emphasis on language play. I mean, little kids love to play with language. All of them do. They like to just make up nonsense rhymes and just play with the sounds of words. And somewhere in the middle school years, they, especially guys, tend to start losing that. They start thinking abstractly and they lose their sense of play with words. And I think Michael's right. We got to keep that alive. There's a way to do that, to show them how much fun a silly poem can be.
That's lovely. Thank you all for those really great insights. And so the question that I have next is sort of connected and sort of dovetails into that, is and this is a giant question, so good luck. What is the value of poetry in today's very busy world?
Well, I'm going to say that we've been through a lot, especially in these past few years, the global pandemic, all sorts of global upheavals, the threat of another world war, threat of climate change, and what it's going to do to our world. So I think people are really turning to poetry again as a way to talk to each other more deeply. I have seen that in my students. I've seen that in other communities that I work with. I teach at the Muse Writing Center, which is a nonprofit community writing center here in Norfolk. And there's just this hunger to find different kinds of expression for what we are carrying, what we are feeling and carrying and wondering about right now. And I often tell my students too that poetry is a kind of technology. People are all over the news now with ChatGPT and AI, but then poetry's technology is just so special because even before your mind registers something, poetry touches those very deep spaces in us where we feel most vulnerable, most human. And then we kind of, like, what happened? What touched me? And that's what poetry can do.
That's lovely. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that giant question?
I might add, and I think I agree with everything Louisa just said, that in getting back to this idea maybe of the making and like understanding things through the making of how you work through an experience or your perception, how you give shape and form to what you see, because we might not be able to articulate these things, and we find, I think, resources in poetry that can give us clarity, if not knowledge, maybe clarity, about what it is we're experiencing, or at least open up new questions to what we're experiencing. So I feel like slowing down in this busy time, right, to kind of give our thoughts some form and give our experiences some form is extremely valuable.
Thank you.
I raised my hand.
Sorry.
This is a big question, but I think one of the most important things that poetry can do is keep raising questions rather than opinions and answers, which we have far too many of. And if we can come together around what is unknown in a poem, we talk about reading between the lines, tell it slant, Emily Dickinson, everything's kind of on the nose these days. And I think we're losing the art of reading as much as anything. And I mean, reading for literary value, not just reading the news. So I think that poetry preserves language, heightened language. It gives voice to the voiceless. And it also is a meeting place where we can raise the questions we need to raise, and also preserve the art of poetry through the tradition of poetry, and also the resistance against that, so that every poet does both, right? We like to chart our own path, but we also know the history of poetry and try to bring that into our work in various ways. So we're preserving the art form and language, and also participating in something that is longer and wider and more important than we are. So yay, poetry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, those are the questions I have from our audience. It's actually about time to wrap up anyway. So if no one has any other thoughts they would like to share, I would really just love to thank all of you for participating today. This has been such a really special evening. Thank you so much. Special thanks again to Tara, Linda, and Jay Bruce for all your help in putting this together. You were absolutely invaluable. Please check out the Library of Virginia's events calendar for more sessions like this coming up. And if you have any interest in scheduling something like this, we're always open to talking to you. So without further ado, I will just go ahead and say good evening for everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful words with us. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much.